tried to wind up and turn my body and just didn't get a very good rotation at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to kick the board away, and when I did that, my right leg buckled underneath me, and I tore my ACL, crumpled to the ground, threw a hissy fit. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
hook it up. Let's get it going. Let's do that. I'm down with the unfiltered. Quite frankly, I thought our version wasn't funny enough to start with, so yeah,
Yeah. All right. So
let's get it.
okay. Let's get it. Okay, guys. So welcome to the second episode of the Humanitree podcast, where we discussed painful experiences and how we can use those painful experiences to build characteristics within both ourselves and the people around us as well. I'm joined today by my best friend, Sam Neron, straight out of Westmont. And we have lots of years together, both skateboarding and post-skateboarding as well. We got really deep into fitness back in our early 20s. And definitely for both of us, that is something that has stuck with us. Me now, I'm doing triathlon training, good old run, bike, swim, and learning a lot from that in terms of training load and taking the more scientific approach. And Sam has been recovering from injury recently. He had a knee. He's now had 3 knee surgeries. Is that right? Is that the right number?
3 of them, yes.
3.
Well, 3.
Okay, so you've had 3 knee surgeries at this point.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people that are potentially afraid of injuring themselves, or maybe they're injured right now and they're struggling with the mental aspect of coming back from the injury, we're today going to discuss how to fight through that period of uncertainty and talk about doing accessory work to prevent the stiffening up, the going back into the bad movement patterns, and improve every single time that you have that injury or that surgery, to really dig deep and find out what it is, because you are basically forced time and time again to dig deep into the situation and actually take self-ownership, which I think a lot of us that really want to get shit done and are serious, we end up being in that situation where we got to take that motherfucker by the horns and actually say, you know what, I know you're a fucking bull, it's not personal, it's nothing against you, but I got to get this shit fucking straight, and otherwise I'm not going to be able to continue progressing and delivering for the people that see value in me. So let's get right into that conversation. We already hit on the initial injury. You guys saw that in the intro, talking about how Sam had his first injury. What was it like coming back from that first injury? Because obviously coming back the first time is going to be the most difficult and the most mentally challenging.
Sure, right. Yeah, definitely, just like anything else, the first time you do something, I think doubt and, questioning yourself, because, you don't have that experience of walking through that situation or down that road, whatever. So right off the bat, the first thing that, goes through your mind is, what do I expect And now that I'm going through these steps, am I doing everything that I possibly can, and am I doing it properly?
Right. And so for you, it probably the first time you would say it was really just kind of like following along with what they were telling you, and you didn't really
Blind,
have.
like a blind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like you didn't really have any insight. Sorry, it's like one side of my face is dark and one is like lighted. So I'm like, okay, can I turn it this way so I can get a little bit? Or actually, I have to.
Yeah, I think you gotta turn the other way. Get that light casting
I
on your
have to get
face.
the light
There you
casting on me. Exactly.
go. Yeah,
Boom.
yeah, there you go.
Oh.
Oh yeah, who wears short shorts? My man
Yeah.
wears short
Well,
shorts.
it's more of a functionality thing for me. I mean,
Sure, sure.
try sitting
Yeah.
on a bicycle for 3 hours with no pad. Is it definitely can be a little bit challenging to sit on that seat for an extended period of time, and you know
Hold on, are you comfy over there? I just want to make sure. Are you comfy right now?
your fucking your taint is being smashed against the fucking seat. Like you're just grinding that motherfucker in for like 3 hours, and dude, when I did this ride across Taiwan, I literally had fucking like just my thing was just fucking torn apart, dude. Like I tore it apart so many fucking different ways. And
Golly.
you don't even let that shit heal because the next day, like, oh, I'm gonna ride,
No.
I'm gonna do 100K tomorrow.
And you ripped it back over.
My shit is already smashed in 3 different ways, and I'm still gonna do 100K tomorrow.
Oh shit.
That's the nature. That's the nature of the beast. Okay, so we're back after a little bit of a whiz break, and we left off talking about how you actually came back after the first injury, what lessons you learned from the first injury, and because I remember when you came back, I don't know if it was after the first or second surgery, you were playing, I think it was at Glen Ellen Park District, and I think honestly, you may agree, like you were probably playing some of the best basketball like of your life. I don't know if you would agree. Like, I remember seeing like Heather on the sidelines and Mike Krawiak. Did I say that right?
I think Krawick.
Yeah, on the sidelines.
Krawick?
I don't know. Let's
Mike
ask. I don't know. Let's ask
if I
him.
don't pronounce his name right.
I don't know. Let's ask him. But I remember seeing you play for Glen Ellen, and like I'm like, this dude is like doing some crazy dynamic movements, looking very confident, very aggressive, and that was around the time that you were trying out for all the minor league teams.
Yeah. So that was after the second surgery.
Okay. So, do you? And if you don't really recall, because the first injury is just like, I mean, you're just following what everybody is telling you pretty much step by step, because you've never you've never had to recover from an injury before. So with no prior experience, you're basically just left at the mercy of your limited strength conditioning knowledge, because really at that point you had just done strength conditioning.
Well, okay, so I'll tell you where I was at when I went through that injury. I was 21. We've talked in the past before. We weren't taking care of ourselves at that time like we do now.
No.
It's night and day. Yeah. So there was that aspect of it where I didn't have any idea or clue how to rehab and get better and get stronger, specifically with that right leg. And then on top of it, I learned later on down the line here just a couple of years ago from my surgeon that I've been seeing recently.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that when I did tear my ACL when I was 21, I actually tore my meniscus too. Um, but
Oh.
but only the ACL was repaired. Yeah, yeah. So
So
I've always had some sort of twinge in that knee, in that joint, where it was never fully fluid. Something wasn't right, right? Um, so that was also part of that battle was more mental than anything, was trying to figure out, why do I feel this way if everybody's telling me that no, it's fully healed, everything's fine, should be back to normal.
yeah, I mean that's a really scary reality in the sort of unknown is like, okay, and
Yeah.
when you first start having these doubts about what other people are telling you and there's inconsistencies there, at first you
Yeah.
sort of start thinking like, is I'm not for you for sure, because there's like physical like inflammation in this case, like your knee is like tightening up, but it's like,
Yeah.
um you know, you sort of start to think like, is it mental, is it a lot simpler than I'm making it out to be, am I just not meant to do this, have I already kind of gone past the finish line as far as what my knee can actually handle. And
Yeah.
I think maybe you would agree that when it comes to the mental game, you start to think about stuff like that and wonder like, am I ever going to be able to have the movement that I did previously? And before you go through this huge journey of, like you've been doing a lot more stretching in the last couple years, and I think we really start to realize that it's not, you can't just keep, I think a big, American Western mentality is like, you can just keep putting on muscle and like more muscle is always better, instead of strengthening the muscle that you have and sticking to different movement patterns. It's like stronger is always better.
Yeah. No, it has to have a purpose, right? So, and especially with athletics.
Right. And I mean, for endurance sports, like
Yeah.
athletes that are
Yeah.
doing endurance sports, like they have minimal muscle, like your arms are very small. Like I can still do
Right.
a lot of the movements that I was doing before when I was doing calisthenics. I'm still working on handstands
Yeah.
here and there, but majority of the movement that I'm doing, like I'm trying to have like a sort of leaner physique
Yeah.
than what I had before,
Yeah.
because I'm just carrying my body for so many kilometers that, I don't want to have all this excess weight.
five,
But
5 pounds of weight ends up being 100 in the type of stuff that you're doing.
yeah,
That's the reality of it.
100%. And right now I'm just focused on mostly understanding all the different components that are at play.
Yeah.
Recovering. So like you do a really hard day with hill reps, and then how do you recover from that? And the program that I've been doing, it's by going back and activating the muscles. So after you've stressed them basically to their max, you go back and you do little small intervals where you apply that same amount of stress, and you try to, as I said, activate the muscles in the same way, but for shorter intervals, which equates to less intensity. Maybe you can't do 400 watts for 20 minutes, but you can do, a bunch of 1 or 2 minute intervals with recovery in between. So that's something that I've learned from doing this style of training. And as you learn from, the injuries that you've had and coming back from those and rehabbing, it's break and repair. It's always about, that building and repairing process.
Sure. Was that my cue?
That's the end of the video. That's it right there. No, no, but so you after the first surgery, it was basically just following the guidelines. Do you remember any like difficulties, any mental barriers that you hit time and time again coming back from that first injury? I remember that every surgery that you've had, you've always come back faster than what the doctors predicted.
Yeah, and that's always kind of been a goal of mine, and not just to beat that guideline, as in a sense of ego, but more along the lines of I know who I am and what I'm capable of, and I know a number that is given as far as a timetable for recovery is subjective because it has to hit a broad range of people. And I consider myself to be like professional athlete type of
capability,
exactly. Where
and understanding too, like that's the mentality that I take with my training as well. I look at the elite athletes and people say like, man, you're so hard on yourself, why are you training so hard? And I say like, that's the mentality that I have. I want to emulate the people that are doing it the best, and I don't care necessarily what the result is, but in my mind, if I'm not emulating the people that are to some extent that or understanding what they're doing and why they're doing it, then I'm not getting the value out of spending that time doing that type of training. For me, there's no other option. It's to train with the best quality. And sure, there's some days where I'm doing like the pool over here in Lodong, Taiwan is it's like 20 degrees, like 19 or 20 degrees Celsius, which is like 65 to 70 Fahrenheit. It's fucking cold, and like my body gets so tired so quickly. Whereas the actual pool or the water that I'd be swimming in the actual competition would be like 28 degrees. But I find that by swimming in that cold pool, even though it's more difficult, I actually gain endurance by doing that, and something that a lot of people are realizing now. Wim Hof has popularized the cold therapy. It really allows the body to cool off. I would say that maybe you don't want to send your body through extremes all the time, but if you can do it consciously and notice the subtle differences and find that right right balance, it's an extremely useful tool, especially for running, because your body just wants to like tighten up after doing such a long run or something that's really strenuous on your muscles, and that cold therapy allows your body to actually cool off, so that it's not so that blood can actually that old blood or blood that hasn't been circulating can actually move through your body.
Yeah, I think honestly there's a time and place for that type of recovery too, because obviously recovery is important, right? But you have to understand what type of recovery goes into your sport, right?
Yeah.
So I actually feel for distance running in specific, going into like immersing your body into like a cold pool, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if that actually has the most benefit because distance running shortens your range of motion.
Uh,
Um, yeah, as compared
which you
to
have to it's interesting that you bring that up, that distance running shortens your range of motion. Do you find that that applies in basketball as well?
sometimes it depends what movements you're actually making.
Uh-huh.
But if you're gonna take sprinting and distance running, for example, right? Because those are kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes, different types of muscles are involved and the movement is going to be different.
Yeah, yeah. So that's where I'm at as far as comparing those two. That sprinting takes a more of a uh, wider range of motion, more dynamic movement.
Right, and there's much more muscle activation in a short period of time than distance running. Distance running, like for me, it's just trying to hold a certain pace level, and then maybe I'll speed up a little bit, but the
Yeah,
speed increases are much more gradual because
yeah,
for long distance, it's working around your heart rate, right? It's like I kind of think of it as like you got a battery capacity, and
yeah, yeah,
if you heat up that battery, your body is really the same way. Like if you heat up that battery really fast, you're losing energy just on the pure heat, just the
hmm,
pure heating up, the acceleration of your heart rate. You're losing
yeah,
energy just because you accelerate so fast. So that's the reason why you see very gradual increases and also decreases. If if your heart rate drops from 150 to 100 because you just stopped, well, now your body has to do a bunch of work to get your heart rate back up to that same point. So it's kind of wasted energy in that sense. Um,
hmm,
so definitely, uh, you know, the gradual increases and decreases for the endurance, and I think that this sort of like to some extent, I think it applies to uh, basketball as well because basketball is really an endurance sport, much the same. And I think that if you just spike your heart rate so many times, I mean that's going to drain your battery, so to speak. And also it I think more fluid movement potentially protects you from injury because you're not stopping and going so much.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you see, if you turn on NBA, WNBA, whatever it is, maybe NBA in specific, we can, you know, um, talk about. There's a reason, you look at a guy like LeBron James. This guy is 35 years old. I think 17 years in the league, and he's still at the not only the top of his game, but at the top of the game in general. He's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, probably this year considered to be the MVP. Um, you know, not just him, all of these other guys that are in the league that are older, so 30 plus and over. Um, Basketball is primarily fast twitch muscle movements.
Yeah.
And your fast twitch muscle fibers are the first thing to go as you age.
Uh huh.
So, um, you
It's
know,
from that perspective, it's quite incredible that these guys are able to move faster than any young guy, as fast, if not faster, than any young guy that comes into the league.
sure, that was
And
kind of the point. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's really that comes down to a lot of conditioning and putting the body in situations to actually have to use that fast twitch. For example, running up hills, or having the strap around you where you got to drag the weight, and you have to respond. Your fast twitch muscles are more involved in pulling that weight and trying to like jerk it forward.
Right. Yeah. You have to first and foremost wake up your neuromuscular system and tell it, okay, this is how we're going to operate from now on.
Yes.
And then, maybe you can get into heavy lifting directly after that. And that forces your system to, I forget the exact like algorithm or whatever, but it's force times mass production or something like that. And that creates your velocity that increases your vertical jump or makes you run faster, things of that nature.
Maybe you're thinking of the mass acceleration equation, something like that.
Yeah, man, it's been a couple of years, yeah. I forget.
F equals ma, force equals mass times acceleration.
There you go. You got it. That's it. There you go.
But yeah, and also like I something that I was curious to ask is, if how much you think the endurance aspect is connected to basketball. I mean, guys are definitely, pretty much moving around the whole game, right? Like the worst thing that you can do body language wise from a team perspective is have your team just standing on the 3-point line, or like standing under the basket, not moving at all.
Right. Yeah.
Is there anything that, I know you're not playing right now, but while you were playing, like when you were at your peak, when you were going and doing these minor league tryouts,
Sure.
that you would actively think about how to improve your endurance or sustain yourself throughout playing?
Yeah. To go back to your earlier point about endurance and its importance within basketball, it's huge. I mean, it's, like you were saying before, it is an endurance sport. Basketball is.
But then you also have explosive movements as well at certain times.
Yeah, right. So it's a mix of anaerobic. So one of the tryouts that I did, I felt like I played pretty well. It was a Grand Rapids Drive is the team, their G League team in Michigan, and their focus, actually, they're a lot like the Miami Heat are now, but their focus is endurance specifically. And it's funny watching from an outside perspective. You watch these NBA games and you wouldn't be able to tell, these teams' identities just from seeing it. But you go into their environment and you start to see the way that these guys work. Mm-hmm. And everybody's got a different style and strategy to the game that they bring. So the Detroit Pistons is the Grand Rapids.
They're minor league team.
Yeah, they're affiliate. And so when I went to the tryout, I felt like I did fairly well. I got to talk to one of the coaches, and I thought I was moving on to the next tryout, actually.
Right.
But he gave me I picked his brain. He gave me a lot of good pointers. At that time, I was, getting into fitness, but I wasn't where I, felt like I should be. And that was kind of to his point too. that I was in good shape to be better than, the field, the cast of people that were at that tryout, right?
Yeah.
I was able to stand out. But it's one thing to stand out amongst those people that want to get somewhere, but you have to be able to stand out amongst the people that are already there, right?
Yes.
So, so again, I talked to these coaches that I was able to, to speak with, and one of the things that stuck out to me, this was 4 years ago that, I had this conversation, but I'll remember it forever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because it was one of my favorite players growing up, Allen Iverson. And yeah, so he was in his prime in Philadelphia. He kind of bounced around after that. I think he went to Denver and then Detroit, or he went to Detroit, then Denver, vice versa. I can't really remember.
Yeah, Detroit sounds right.
But Detroit was actually, he was kind of at the tail end of his career, and he wasn't the Allen Iverson, that was a freak in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But the one thing that to this day, and, forever onward, that stuck out to me is the work ethic that this dude, Allen Iverson, had, even at the end, the twilight of his career.
Uh-huh.
And they told me about some of his workouts that he did. And the first thing that he did every single day, before even getting into the gym, he would run, and I can't remember now if it was 3 or 5 miles. Maybe it was 3.
Yeah.
It was a 5K maybe. But they said he would run it backwards. To start his day, before he even got in the gym, he would run a 5K backwards and then go and hit all the other workouts that he had to do for the day. But you want to talk about basketball being an endurance sport.
Yeah.
That's the way he would start his day, every single day.
Well, I think to do that, you might not want to do it on the street. Like when I go and run, I'm running on the street, so I'm not I'm not gonna be running back. I guess it would work because I would see who's behind me.
No,
but
you might run into a car.
What's in front of you is probably a lot more important than what's behind you. But I imagine he was probably running on a track or along a river or something like that. But that's fucking crazy, man, to run that far backwards. I mean,
well, and then to think about it too, you want to talk about a guy, Allen Iverson. That's a huge name dude that he could take days off. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have to. He had his whole rant about practice, whatever. He doesn't have to practice. He's freaking Allen Iverson, but he's still going out there day in and day out doing that type of stuff.
I think that, I mean, people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that speech was more to just like, why are you asking me about that? Like we're talking about the game here.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's not. But people take it. People always go back and they take that as like, oh, he doesn't practice or he's mocking practice. No,
I think those people don't really fully understand the game.
But
and
am I correct in saying that that's how the masses interpret that? Is like he doesn't want to practice.
You're completely correct. Yeah.
Right.
Where he's just saying the dude literally just got off of the floor. He just got out of the locker room, and it's silly.
Yeah, I think a lot of us just take stuff at face value. Like, I mean, I know that's the way that I interpreted it when I was first seeing this video, but now my like intuition says no, he's just responding to what's going on in the moment, and he's saying like, in this moment, why would you ask me about that? Why is that important?
Right. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I've never thought about that until now. And of
Yeah.
course, I'm coming at it from the perspective of like, this dude trains really, really fucking hard. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what the dude says. If he's performing at a high level, it's because he's training himself to do that movement at a high level,
Mm-hmm.
and visualizing it. You have to visualize whatever it is to get to that level and to be able to perform that way. You know, you can't think in a scared mindset, or be surprised when you go on the court. This guy was prepared every time he went onto the court,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know, that's like it's like Kobe. Like there was some video about Kobe, and he would show up before this other guy. Do you know this sports commentator that talked about the story where Kobe would show up at the gym before him?
Yeah, I've actually heard the story previously.
Right. And he says, I don't want to let you think that you can outwork me. So, and
Yeah.
I'm definitely the same mentality. Um,
Yeah.
you know, for me, that's right now, that's totally self-dependent. There's nobody around me. I have found a few people around Taiwan that are doing Ironman training. I met one guy in Taipei, and he's actually swimming. I know he's swimming right now in Taipei, and he's a French guy. He's done the Ironman Vietnam. He's doing it again this year. And I've also met a long distance swimmer who he wants to do like a 10K swim, and he said, oh, like, you know, we'll just go take a boat 10K out onto this island, and then he wants to swim like all the way back or something. So I don't know. I don't know if the Taiwan government would let you do that because they're pretty afraid of the water here. They culturally, I mean, not like people in this generation, but like older generations, they were they latched onto this idea that like ghosts came from the water, and like if you went out into the water, like the ghosts, especially at night, like the ghosts would grab you or something. So
Yeah. Right.
the generations here haven't really been big into swimming for that reason, I
Wow.
guess.
Wow.
Yeah, and like, I mean,
That's,
just now they're learning how to swim. Like the competition for swimming is not at a very high level here. But I
yeah.
will say there are tons of public pools um, around here. I don't think they're mostly outdoor here. And they're like the warmest one I've been to is like 22 degrees, which is still fairly cold.
Yeah.
But and it's nice that those public pools exist. They actually, the public pool over here, they bring water from the cold springs, so it's not just,
Oh.
and this is a really interesting thing about Taiwan is like the water in the pool is not heavily chlorinated at all. Like in the U.S. and I
Okay.
think even in Europe, the pools are so heavily chlorinated to the point that when you get out, your eyes are just like red and dry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here, it's not like that at all. And as I said, the swimming pool over here, I think a few of them, they bring water from the cold springs, like from the actual like mountainside, and
Wow.
put that in the pool. And they change the water out every single week. So every Monday, one of the pools over here is closed, and they
Okay.
actually will change out the water. They bring water from the cold springs, which
Cool.
is maybe 20, 30 minutes away, something like that. So,
Very
um,
cool.
yeah. Especially, it's nice to jump in there when you're like super hot
Yeah. Oh yeah.
from the
Right.
humidity, and just to jump in that cold pool feels so amazingly good. So I'm looking forward to that during the summer. So we've kind of gone over your journey of demystifying the fact that you actually had an underlying meniscus tear, not just the ACL. That's, you know, why you had repeated inflammation over and over and over. can you talk about as you went through each surgery, um, what kind of accessory type work were you doing? Because you obviously have to build the strength in that joint again,
Yeah.
and build the muscles around that joint. I think that's something that people don't realize is when there's two things involved when you have any sort of joint inflammation. Number one is you need to get the bad tissue out of there. And so you need to actually work that thing. So like if today I say, okay, I have tennis elbow, well, I actually need to do something with my elbow, whether that's, stretch out the muscles or do some, push-ups or something to actually activate that tissue, because the weak tissue is there because your body doesn't have enough resources to repair it fast enough. So it puts weak tissue in there, which has more nerve endings, so it's more responsive to, it's more painful, and of course it's weak, so it actually tears easier. So once you are in that state, you need to continue to work at it, but not to a point where you sort of over exert it. You need to find that right middle point.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I guess before I talk about the accessory work, there was,
Yeah,
I guess,
whatever you want to hit on.
sure, sure. Um, so we first started getting into fitness. Um, I think that was about 2014, 15
Yeah,
is
that
when
sounds
we
about right.
really kind of like looked at each other and made a commitment and said, look, we've both been, overweight, out of shape. We're not going back.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, that we took kind of like that trial period of finding out, what are the best exercises, when should you do them, how to couple and pair everything together. Um, so, um, I, I actually, I tore my knee up in 2015, and I think that's when you were still at Good Sam Hospital, the
yeah,
gym over
yeah.
there.
No, 2016, I was working in Oak Brook until mid 2016 was when I moved to, or late 2016 was when I moved to Schaumburg, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so really, it was after that tear in 2015, um, and I actually that's when I started to learn about everything that was going on inside the joint, as far as the meniscus not being repaired and the
We
articular
also we
cartilage.
lost your webcam.
Okay.
So maybe
Uh,
just you can just turn it on and off.
you, my back.
Yeah, it's okay. Yep. Boom.
Okay. Cool. Um, so yeah, 2015 was actually when I, severely tore up that knee, and you know, when you talk articular cartilage, that's when um, things start to get serious then, because that's the stuff that lines your bones, the stuff that does not come back on its own, um, and is, it's very brittle. It's not the same as your meniscus. That buffer is thick and it's resilient. Um, so once I really kind of learned everything I did regarding that injury, we had already made such a jump going from out of shape to now in shape, and
Right.
then something like that happens. Um, it really, like, I don't want to say I went like crazy or whatever, but it it really forced me to evaluate, like, okay, I'm not dying right here.
Yeah.
What do I need to do to move forward and get myself back to doing what I love doing? Because I'm, I refuse to die right here. Um, like,
Like truth, because
really,
you have this very strong idea, and for people that don't understand, you have this very strong idea in your mind of who you are, and you're very
yeah,
connected to this identity. And when that identity starts to slip, it really does feel to some extent like death, because you're losing this idea, this visualization of
yeah,
who you are. And if you're somebody who is very visual, like myself and maybe you start to say, well, what does that look like? What does that look like further down the line? Like,
yeah,
no, like this doesn't look good. Like I need to correct this trajectory. And something,
yeah,
that for me, that trajectory, to maintain that is very important, and I will sacrifice everything to maintain that trajectory. And for me, that just means achieving a higher level of fitness, and doing the work is the most important thing. But I think secondary as well is feeling like that work is actually, like, you're actually gaining from that. You're moving in the direction that you want. For me, that's kind of difficult sometimes, because I don't always have especially, here sometimes I don't have 100% of the tools. Keeping my pace while I'm swimming. Sometimes your run pace kind of dips, or your heart rate is getting too high, and you kind of have to back off a little bit. And it's, you gotta push hard for sure, but when you feel like that pushing hard is not getting you the result that you want, which is that you're actually supposed to feel comfortable. Like, you're not supposed to, while I'm doing a long run or while you're playing basketball, you're not supposed to be in pain or feel like you're at the end of your you know of your tank of gas, or your energy. Most of the time you're
I
supposed to.
can't hear you.
Okay,
I
that's
can't hear you.
okay. um what about now? Now. Hey, can you hear me now? It's coming through on the mic. Basket Skate 3 has left the call. Okay, I think he's gonna rejoin. Okay.
I I think I think I hit the wrong button.
Oh, okay.
I exited out. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, and I think, are we getting echo?
No.
I think there's a slight echo because my audio is coming through on your side.
Oh, and it's playing back to you. I got you.
Yeah, I think you had headphones before.
Yeah.
But what I was saying is that you want to actually feel good while you're doing the type of movements that you want to be doing. So, for example, I and sometimes you don't have all the tools, or you feel like all the pieces aren't there. Um, I'm not swimming at the pace that I want to be swimming at. I'm swimming it a little bit slower because, it's a cold pool, and okay, my heart rate is too high for this pace zone, so I have to back off a little bit. There's things that, like, don't always go perfect sometimes, and instead of trying, I think, you know, instead of trying to always push sometimes, I think actually backing off a little bit is important, because you want to think, what does the end game look like, and try to achieve that level of quality. If you can't have that I'm not saying don't push yourself to an anaerobic level, but you want the quality to be there, and you should feel good while you're doing it, because I mean, just from a mental being able to push through pain is absolutely essential. But I think that there is a time and place for that, and I think that time and place is in situations like a race or a game. Those are the situations where I think you want to be pushing to an uncomfortable point. But I don't think that majority of your actual training you should feel uncomfortable. And so
Yeah.
that I think is the should be the target, the bullseye for people that are recovering from injury or just flat out training, is that you always, majority of the time, like I heard this triathlete Lionel Sanders say 80% of the time you want to feel good, like you're doing quality work. There's going to be the 20% that you're going to suffer through potentially, but 80% of the time you want to feel like you actually feel good, like your systems are running the way that they're supposed to be running, and you don't feel completely gassed or at your end, so to speak. And it just makes sense from the perspective of, being at your end is where you're closest to injury. So if that is the case, then you don't want to put yourself in that situation so often, and especially not when you're training. If you're doing a race or a basketball game, this is definitely more a scenario where you want to push yourself to that end. But I think even basketball athletes, if you're doing back-to-back games, multiple consecutive days, you have to think about this. Tour de France, or Tour de Taiwan, if you're doing 6 days of cycling and you just blow your load on the first day, well, you might not come back with 100% of your ambition on day 2.
Yeah. Right.
You might, yes, you might have exhausted yourself on the first day, and you really have to, as you pointed out before, talking about strategizing during a game, you can also strategize across multiple games, and the same is true for training. But really, it's training is not a race, and you don't. I think the worst thing that you can do, and again, this is coming from Lionel Sanders. I think I've had you watch some of his videos. He documents all of his training. If he does a 3-hour bike and he holds 300 or 400 watts or whatever he does, he documents a lot of that stuff, which is really, really insightful for me, and helps me keep that mindset of training. But he really prides himself on the fact that most of the training should be quality, and you shouldn't feel like you're putting yourself at risk for injury. Sometimes you have to back off in order to get longevity. And he also says that you should not force adaptation. Forcing adaptation in the body is what leads to injury, because, as I said before, you get the weak tissue in the joint, and this is what leads to injury time and time again, because that weak tissue is going to get torn. You're going to be in pain, so you're not actually going to feel good while you're training. You're not going to enjoy it. I think really the mental is as important as the physical, because, as I said, if you're not enjoying the training while you're doing it, how are you going to perform at the highest level in the actual race, in the actual basketball game?
Sure. Well, on top of it too, to your point, when you have something that's not firing properly, be it your the elbow, for example, again. Well, that's a weak link in the kinetic chain.
Yep.
So when you're training, your body, subconsciously it guards against that injury. So if you're doing, shoulder press, chest press, pull ups, whatever it may be, if you're having issues here, well, it's going to affect all the way across to here, all the way down to the toes, and back up to the head.
Yep. Wherever that energy or that movement or
Yeah,
that
where it's originated.
pressure um, moves around to, it's, as you said, it's always going to be a weak link. And if you have a very sensitive elbow, it's the movement's going to stop there, and you're going to and it's
Yeah,
not going to feel
yeah,
good. I've been fortunate to not have too much injury, and anytime I feel like any sort of knee pain or anything, I back off, I stretch. Occasionally when I'm swimming, because when you're swimming, you want to keep your feet actually pointed, so that they don't drag in the water. You want to keep
yeah,
them pointed like this,
yeah.
and sometimes that activates my calf, and then my
Right.
calf
Yeah.
is like tightening
Yeah.
up, and I just feel it like tightening, tightening, and I have
Yeah.
to like stop. I'm like, fuck, like, can you just fucking work? But you have to like stop and like stretch out in that session, and once you kind of take care of that, then you can continue going. But being aware of those weak points, or that those, because they keep reoccurring. As you pointed out, they keep reoccurring. For me,
Yeah.
I've had the calf thing maybe 2 or 3 times across the 6 months that I've been training, and I think it normally comes after. I think it's from cycling, because you use that your calves are
Yeah.
very much
Yeah.
in use for
From
cycling.
cycling. Yeah. Cycling and running too, but um, at least from like my experience of having to cycle, the calves definitely get a beating. They take a beating from that.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's definitely the case. And yeah, for me the challenge is like, well, now actually the point, and also I think important too, for training or recovering from injury, is understanding where you're at in the process. So
Sure.
for example, for me now, when I was the first 3 to 4 months of training, that was just building up my fitness, and intensity wise, just doing very intense movement, and with the swimming, with the biking especially. The focus was initially cycling and increasing my fitness on the bike, the program that I'm following. And now it's more geared towards increasing my endurance and doing actual race like intervals. So whether that's doing an hour, 1 to 2 hours on the bike, and then immediately doing the run right after. And again, these are race like intervals. So I'll hold, level 2 is endurance. Level 3 is like what you're supposed to be in during the race. So trying to hold those level 3s for like 20 minutes
Yeah.
is quite difficult. And like, you know, you have to stop sometimes because there's a kid in front of you. Like, because I'm like blowing down, I'm going like max speed, like 20 something miles per hour down the riverside. And like, I have to watch out for kids sometimes, unfortunately. But yeah, no, understanding where you're at in your training is very important too. For me right now, it's endurance. So being able to run that full distance. I was
Yeah.
supposed to do an hour and 20-minute run the other day, and I chopped off like 10 minutes because I said, okay, this is enough. Like, I've gotten enough quality out of this.
Sure.
But I really try to do everything to compliance as much as possible. I think that day is actually, I was very a little crunched for time. But, like maybe just take us through the recovery process, and like maybe you can think to one point where you had to realize like, hey, I'm in this point in the recovery process, so I actually need to
Yeah.
focus on this more and gear what I'm doing, stretching, strength wise, around
Right.
this
Right.
piece.
Um, so yeah, I mean, again, going back, I kind of gave you like a brief history of what I've been through already. And I guess the best way to kind of go off of your point is to talk about where I left off, and that was after tearing the articular cartilage. Um, uh, Surgery wasn't necessarily an option for me at that time, within myself, but also my surgeon was suggesting against it, trying to prolong, the joint itself and uh, uh, still kind of get quality years out of the leg before, he had to do another procedure. So accessory work was huge because, in a sense, I had to kind of scrap this idea of who I was, and I had to say, okay, I'm now at that time I'm saying I'm 26 years old. I'm not who I was before this knee injury when I was 20. And the knee isn't gonna get better until I have this surgery. So I had to kind of like wipe the slate clean, say, this is what it is.
Yeah.
How do I build up from zero and get myself as close to where my ceiling can be? How do I, get as close to that as possible until I can have this surgery and kind of raise my ceiling a little bit higher then because everything's healed. So to your point, I did my homework on everything. I mean, dude, I lived on a desktop as far as the type, all the research that I was doing. First and foremost, that was the most important thing. I mean, I spent 24/7 just locked in on the computer reading about everything that I could possibly do. And then, putting it into action and forming a plan.
No, I mean anybody who's committed to anything, it's like you will, because you in the information age, you have absolutely no excuses. You have all the information that is there, and sometimes I think for a lot of us that can become that amount of information can become overburdening, and we have to sift through all of it. But the most important thing is to try to take that into our reality and test it out, because otherwise it's just opinion. It's not, it holds no weight unless it actually fits into your circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But yeah, going back to that time, there was a lot of physical therapy that was involved, but again, when you have an injury that's like a knee or an elbow that's specifically like one side of the body, it's not as simple as you really have to take your body and cut it in half and focus on single leg movements, focus on single arm movements, whatever it is. And you can't neglect, one side for the other.
Uh-huh.
After surgery, because one side, the side that surgery is performed on, that those muscles atrophy. That's the time that you focus more on the surgically repaired side than the other side. But once you get through that threshold, a lot of your training comes down to single leg or single arm movements and multiple planes of movement as well. It doesn't help, for example, to do lunges in one plane of motion when you have a knee injury. You have to be able to move that leg every which direction, still within that hinge, but you have to go forward, back, side, side. So again, that's how you have to tailor your training protocol.
Yeah, and maybe the accessory work that I do on off running days. So like today, I'm supposed to do a 2-hour run, which I imagine that I will hit. I should hit 21 kilometers or a half marathon. Doing that, I'm definitely going to, try to integrate some of the accessory work when I go to the gym, or I actually have that band that you gave me that I got a little bit sweaty back in Chicago.
Stole. You stole because you got it so sweaty.
Nasty as hell.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah. So I still have that, and
Cool.
I'll definitely we should do another video or another piece. Maybe you can record something where you're doing some accessory exercises, and then
sure.
We can upload that as like a supplement to this conversation. Specifically, I would think around the knee, because that's been your focus and your central point in the kinetic chain that hasn't worked so well for you over the years. So yeah, maybe give people something that they can apply to the knees
Visually, sure, yeah.
and definitely don't think that whatever is presented is just limited to the knees. People can always find some way to apply this to different joints. It's really looking at a high level and seeing the similarities across different joints, and trying to get that little nugget that you can apply to all of your other joints. But yeah, let's definitely do that. Record something, maybe with your phone, some exercise that you do, and
Sure.
We can put some commentary over it. Okay, so I think is there anything else that you want to touch on as far as like recovery, what you want to do in the future? We should definitely ask you, what's the highest level of you that you want to achieve, and what have you done today, or what are you going to do today to get closer to that?
I was actually, when you told me you wanted to do a podcast the other day, I was kind of just, thinking randomly about all the, whatever topics we would touch on, whatever. And it was in that moment that all of a sudden, like, something just, like, clicked upstairs. And I was thinking about, you could talk to anybody, ask them what their passion is, what they want to do in life. You ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up, whatever.
Yes.
And I was sitting and thinking, I'm like, everybody has something like that.
Yes.
But when you go through a surgery and, whatever spot within that recovery timeline you're at, the only thing you're telling yourself, you're not saying, I want to be a scientist, I want to be, this, that, or the other. You're saying, give me my leg back. I want to be healthy again. I want to just be able to, you're on crutches, I want to be able to walk again. And it took me back for a second, because I was like, man, that more than anything, this just, it's the most humbling experience that I can ever attest to or even begin to explain.
It makes you 100% when you have those experiences where something's ripped away, or you feel like there's something mentally that's kind of missing, like you're missing that feeling, that experience, and you're thinking about, well, okay, looking at the current situation, how do I actually get back to that? What pieces are actually missing? And I think I can speak for you, is that you want to play basketball at the highest level, and getting to that higher level is, all that matter. It doesn't matter how high the level is, but just getting to a higher level than you've experienced in the past. That's all that you can ask for, to make use of all of these experiences that you had. There's a saying by an old philosopher, I think it's Socrates or maybe Plato. It's, to the effect of, all that a man can ask for is to be useful, to ponder the universe, and there's one other thing, but certainly being useful, I believe, is a very innate human desire, and to make use of all that experience. That's really what the heart of, and the message of this podcast is to make use of that experience, painful or not, to make use of that experience and feel that the time that you spent is ultimately useful, that it's taking you somewhere, or it's providing value to people, and guiding them in some direction.
Yeah.
So did I hit on it? Is you want to play basketball at the highest level possible, or maybe be an aid to somebody who's trying to achieve that?
What's up? Yeah. No, that's exactly it. I mean, me personally, again, my whole story. I've had a piece of my leg missing since I've been 21 years old. I'm now 29, about to be 30. In my mind, I feel like my best years, maybe I didn't get to see them. You talk about your prime athletic years, whatever. I didn't necessarily get to experience them how I would have wanted to. So I feel that I owe it to myself to, could I sit on the couch and eat donuts all day? I fucking love Krispy Kremes. I could do that. I could knock out a dozen right now. Like, no lie. Do not even, don't tempt me. But no, at the end of the day, we owe it to ourselves to do these things, whether it is basketball or whatever the passion is.
Yeah.
You got to go into it with a never say die attitude, and just say, this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
And that's absolutely the best feeling, because I think it gives you the highest level of appreciation when you're able to do exactly the thing that you visualized. And my point to you would be, there's always another way to frame it, and point to everybody that's listening, there's always another way to frame it. Maybe you would not have had the level of appreciation that you would have now to be able to play at that high of a level. Maybe your ego would have gotten in the way, and you would have gotten caught in playing mental gymnastics with yourself, like, why am I not good enough or whatever, when at the end of the day, the most important thing is to appreciate, to enjoy life, because if that is not the end goal, then what are we what are we really doing if it's not for ourselves? You know, that's what you know, we sort of understand ourselves is the easiest way, because we're experiencing everything through our own perspective. So if it doesn't circle back to us, the thing that we understand the best, you know, through the senses that we have, then what is it all for? So, you know, I think the fact that you're able to appreciate playing basketball at a higher level because you have all of those pieces, the strong knee, the mobile hips, you know, the upper body strength required to grip the ball. The fact that you have all of those pieces and you're able to play at a high level, I think is enough, because all you have to be able to do is appreciate what you're doing, and building that purpose, building that story, really just increases the level of appreciation, of gratitude that you have. So, you know, that's my message to anybody that feels like they're stuck in something, or you know, that the journey is long and they can't really see any progress. Is just enjoy it, and you'll perform better 10 out of 10 times.
Free and easy. Free and easy, baby.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is, and I think professional basketball players would absolutely agree with me, because they have all these things around them to drive their appreciation. You know, people that are not famous maybe have a harder time driving that appreciation within themselves, because they think that it's supposed to come from external, like more people are supposed to realize that they have this gift, or something along those lines.
Right.
But I think, you know, for me and maybe for you, just knowing that objectively, or we have a strong sense that where we are is very far along from most people, even just mentally, you know, because the subjective you know, view is what guides the decisions. It's not that people that are older or more experienced are innately better or more capable, but they just have that discipline and they're grateful for what they're doing, and that allows them to be consistent and consistently put themselves in a position where they're making progress and not taking steps back.
Well said.
Okay, so I think we're gonna wrap it up here, because everybody from the hostel here is waking up. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you, Sam, for the conversation. And I know that this is not the end, and we're gonna find some way to fold something else in. So thank you so much, and be well, guys. Rock on.